All right, everybody. Good afternoon, or early evening, whatever the case may be. It's almost 4 o'clock. I'll get us going for our meeting today just in a few minutes when 4 o'clock arrives. But for anybody showing up yet, getting here a few minutes early, welcome. Hope you guys are having a good day, a good week so far. We're just going to pick up where we left last time once we get to class time, and we'll go over some more notes for our critical thinking class. So thanks, guys. At any point, just as always, feel free to tap into the live chat, say hi, or whatever. And I'll be right with you guys to get the meeting started in a few minutes. As usual, I just try to get here a couple minutes in advance, just so that everybody's got a chance to check into the meeting if they arrive early. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here. To all who are showing up, appreciate your guys' time and attention. Just about 5 minutes, and then we'll get rolling. The cats, yeah, they're just off here, off camera, but they'll probably make a cameo at some point. Right now, they're just kind of resting in the sun. But yeah, they're definitely around. We'll see if they pop up. Good afternoon. Good to see you, Ryan. Sending a quick reminder to some of the students to make sure we get maximum attendance. Okay, cool. Hi, me and all the others here. It's great to be with you guys, virtual or not. So welcome back. Just a couple more minutes before we get going. Same, Mickey's mom. Same. All right, cool. A couple more minutes. Am I any good at chess? I think I'm pretty good. I haven't lost a lot of games in my life, but I don't like play that often. But I learned how to play when I was very young, like 6 years old. So I feel that I'm pretty proficient and good at chess. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hi, Christian, Justin. Good to see you. Cool. Just kicking it until 4. Yeah. Can't stand checkers. I'm out here playing checkers while y'all are playing chess. How am I? I'm very well. No, I mean, that's cool. Checkers is a little more advanced. Hey. Yeah. Okay. Got another minute. 5D chess. I've heard about it as a metaphor for people who think like 5 steps in advance, but I've never, you know what I mean? I've never been to the 5th dimension yet. Or maybe I am, but I just can't see it. Hello. Yeah, the jetpack guy. Not sure if I could quite understand what this man was doing, but yeah, I read the report. Made an actual game. Well, if it's a game, I would love to play it, so I'll go out and look for it. All right, everybody. Seems like we're getting our group together. It's basically 4 o'clock, so I'm just going to get the meeting going right now. Welcome back, everybody. I'm glad to see you guys. Hope you're having a great week and successful first couple of weeks of school. Today, basically, we're going to continue with our notes. So what I try to usually do at the beginning of each new meeting is to just kind of review the major topics that we covered in the last lecture so that there's continuity, and then we'll move on from that, and I'll add some new material to our notes. Okay, so let's just see, what did we cover last time? This is our first few meetings, lecture meetings of critical thinking, and the first major thing I guess I wanted to put out there for everyone was let's understand what it is to even be a good critical thinker, since that's the major topic and concept of the whole course. So as we discussed, to be a good critical thinker is to be the sort of person who, first of all, if they hear some claim that's being put out to them, if they get some information that a person's claiming, they would not believe the claim. They would not suppose that it's true unless it was backed by some kind of good argument or good evidence. So the good critical thinkers of the world are not so easy to trick or fool. They demand, solid evidence and reasons before they're prepared to say that's something that I believe. One second, I gotta close the door over here. Yeah, like I was saying, good critical thinkers don't just easily believe claims that are not based on good supporting evidence or arguments. On the other hand, when they make claims and when they're the one providing the information, they don't just say something and can't back themselves up. A good critical thinker is always prepared to offer a solid argument or reasons to justify the claims that they make to people. And that's, of course, you would expect only reasonable, because if you're the sort of person who needs to hear arguments and evidence, then you probably wouldn't be, on your end, the type of person who just doesn't feel the need to provide any. So good critical thinkers are skilled at judging whether an argument is present to back up a claim, and they're also pretty good at delivering good arguments to support their claims. Bad critical thinkers would be the total opposite, the type of individual that believes things, whether there's good evidence or not, just even if it's not based on any kind of good argument or evidence. And when they make claims to people, bad critical thinkers will just throw up their hands when they're asked to say why. They'll just say, I don't know, that's what I heard, or I don't really have a good reason, but that's how I feel. So we want to be better critical thinkers rather than worse. Therefore, our whole goal is to try and make progress towards that first standard that I was talking about. And then when we were here on last Thursday, we all kind of talked about examples of either individuals or professions or just types of people who could fit into either of those two categories, just to kind of reinforce that lesson. Okay, so after that, we segue into, well, what is an argument then? Because if good critical thinkers need to hear a solid argument before they would believe something, and they're good at making those arguments to support their claims, then we want to be clear about, well, what is an argument actually? And I tried to tell you guys that, there's a little confusion about the meaning of the word in its everyday usage, because when people hear the word, if they've never been schooled in logic or whatever, then they might just think, well, an argument's a bad thing. People shouldn't have arguments because that's not peaceful. That's people getting mean to each other, insulting or whatever, being hostile. But no, argument in the logical sense, in the formal sense, is merely an attempt to support a claim with reasons. To be very precise, an argument is a set of a certain number of sentences. Tell me, who could tell me that? Every argument has to have a minimum of how many sentences in it? It's blank or more. So with an argument, we basically have to have how many at least sentences? 2, yes. There's got to be 2 or more. And the reason for that is because when you have an argument, there's always going to be one statement that's at the bottom. Every argument contains exactly one, what is it called? Let's hear that. The bottom line of the argument, the final sentence that's at the bottom. We call that one the, no Dana, not yet, the conclusion, okay? Let's be very, very straightforward here. The final statement of the argument is the conclusion. Every argument has one conclusion, which is the statement that you're trying to prove to be true. And above the conclusion, there has to be at least one, now we get to the other term, at least one premise, okay? And we also gave the clear definition of the 2 terms. Conclusion is a statement that you're trying to prove to be true. The whole point of making the argument is to make a case for that conclusion. And the evidence that's supposed to stand in support of the conclusion, those are the premises. So unless there's at least one premise to go along with the conclusion, the statement by itself would not be counted as an argument. If I say to you, COVID-19 is going to disappear, that would not really be an argument because it's not based on any reason. Now, a person could make an argument for that claim if they had reasons to give. But a claim by itself, even if it's true, is not yet an argument. Okay, so I think after that, we just discussed for a little while what are some different conclusion and premise indicator words. Did we cover that? Who could tell me what are some words which indicate that the conclusion is being stated in the argument? Let's see who can tell me about that. There's a sort of family of words, right? Therefore is one of them. Thus is another one. Hence is also a good example. Therefore, thus, hence, so, ergo, it follows, all, okay, good, perfect. All you guys are getting the right kind of examples. So that whole set of words there are what we call conclusion indicator words. What they tell you is that following this word is the conclusion of some argument. We also, I believe, talked about premise indicator words, right? And those are words which indicate the pieces or the premises, in other words, for the conclusion. Can we say what maybe some of those premise indicator words were? Let's see who has got a handle on that. The premise indicator words. Because, since, due to the fact that, yes, thank you guys. Those are all supposing that, given that, exactly. Since and because, I would say, are probably the 2 most widely used, but all of those are fair. Okay, so I tried to also tell you guys that when you write out an argument, if it's in standard form, the whole concept of standard form is that you have to kind of display the argument on the page a certain way. So where does the conclusion go of the argument if it's written in a standard form? Where does that conclusion go? The bottom, right? The end, the bottom. So it would be at the below the last line. And the premises are above that. And there's a horizontal line that we will use to separate the bottom conclusion from the premises that are listed above. And the last thing about the standard form, not to forget, is that each premise is supposed to be on its own individual horizontal ledger line. So they're not supposed to continuously run on the same horizontal line. When one statement, one sentence of a premise ends, a new line, which can even be numbered, has to be generated. And then we continue with the premises until we've finished those, and then we get to the conclusion. Now, I want to say one thing. Sometimes when people talk informally or in writing, the standard form of an argument is not provided in that order. Like if I told you Biden will win the election because the coronavirus is out of control, what's the conclusion of that argument? You heard me say the statement, right? I'm not like making this argument, but as an example, I could give one about Trump. Trump will win the election because of Biden's criminal justice bill. But take either case. What would be the conclusion of the first example? Biden will win the election, right? Biden will win because, and then the reason is stated afterwards. In logical notation, though, we're going to just try to always adhere to the convention that the conclusion is placed at the bottom. Even though when you hear an argument presented informally, you might have to sometimes think for a moment about what the actual conclusion is. It's the thing that is being based on the because reasons. So just understand that little feature of how we talk when we actually make arguments in our everyday lives. Okay, from there, I guess I did talk to you guys about the term truth, right? And that's fundamental because the whole point of making any argument would be to try and show that the conclusion of the argument is true. So tell me again, what does the term truth mean exactly? If a sentence is true, what does that actually, what does that say? What does that amount to? To be a true sentence, what has to be happening? Something that is real. I like that, Jade, yeah. It's something that matches reality for sure, yeah. So I mean, there's infinitely many statements that are true. I'm wearing, I don't know, a button-up shirt. Over to my right is Pacific Coast Highway because I live right off the PCH. You know, Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States. Buzz Aldrin was the first man to walk on the moon. You know, there's all kinds of facts, right? There are sentences, but they're in alignment with the reality. But if I told you that I'm wearing a cardigan right now, that's just not true. If I say to you that the street outside of my apartment is Melrose, that's not true. So sentences are true or false if the facts line up with them or if they don't, okay? So if I told you, I don't know, I have $10 million in my bank account, that's not really true. There is an accurate figure that I could look up and find out and tell you the true amount, but it's not that amount. So we as critical thinkers and just citizens and human beings in general would prefer if our beliefs turned out more often to be true than false, because when you have got false beliefs, as we've seen now by the meaning of the term truth, that would be being out of alignment with reality, to think of the world that it's a some type of way, but it's actually not. Now, this is one thing I think that I didn't quite discuss, so now we kind of pick up with a little bit of new notes, even though I think it's been mentioned in passing. It's kind of related to the term truth, and that is the term and concept of belief. All right, so let's consider this term, or this idea. So, belief. What do you think it means if a person has a belief in a sentence? Like if I believe some statement, what does that mean about me? To believe that, I don't know, Canada is to our north, or to believe that Fullerton is in Orange County, right? Something that you think is true. So to believe a sentence is to think of it as matching the world, okay? So let me just make that very clear. Belief. When a person thinks that a sentence is true. Okay, so what you think is true is what you believe. And there's an interesting difference between truth itself and the concept of belief, because truth is based on what's factual, and therefore truth is actually objective. So like, for example, the moon, it's orbiting the planet Earth. That's just true. Whether you believe it or not, that's just a fact. And if two people disagree about that, like maybe one person thinks the moon is like a hoax, like it's just a projection up there in the sky, like the bat signal. That person doesn't even believe the moon exists, and the other individual does. They can't both be right. It can't both be that it's real and that it's not real. So there's only one set of objective facts. There's not different facts for every person, right? But there are different beliefs that different people can have. So if one person says, I think the world is flat, that's my belief. Another person says, that is ridiculous. It's obviously a sphere. We're talking now about two people with two different beliefs. But how many planets are there? One. And how many different shapes can it possibly have? Only one. So they're not both correct, even though they both think they are. So beliefs are things that people can have subjective differences between them. I can believe as a juror that the defendant is guilty. And another person in the same jury can think, I've actually got the view that they're innocent, right? But the person themselves is not both guilty and innocent. One side of this case is the truth. So facts are what they are, and they don't change whether a person believes them or not. But beliefs, of course, are subject to the judgment of the individual. So we can get our beliefs wrong, as we know. That's when you have a false belief, something that you think is true, but you learn later or maybe never come to know it, but it's not actually true. Like little kids believe in Santa Claus. They think that there's really such a person that delivers their gifts, some of them anyway, but that's a false belief. So we, as mature adults, are trying our best in this life, in this world, to come up with our true beliefs, to make sure that the things we really think are true actually are. Why is it so hard to find ourselves with true beliefs? Well, I guess sometimes it's because the truth hurts, because the truth is not always favorable to what you would hope. And in those cases, a lot of people will refuse to believe what's true because it's disturbing to them. But we want to pursue the truth because you're better off being informed with the truth, even if it's not so pleasant. Take the case of a person who's been ordered to evacuate their home because of a brush fire, and now they've got doubts about the authorities' pronouncement. It might not be such a nice thought to believe that their house could be damaged in the fire, so they choose to ignore the report. But they would be better off if they had had the tough but truthful belief rather than the comforting false belief in case the fire actually does come up there. Okay, so we're trying our best to get to true beliefs. Okay then, so now that kind of gets through some of the main topics for the first big unit of our discussions. I want to now go on and discuss with you guys two main types of argument. So in logic, there are two major forms of argument or ways of reasoning, and that is deduction versus induction. So for now, I just kind of want to tell you guys what is the difference between deductive and inductive arguments. We're going to start with the deductive style of argument. Okay. Okay, so yeah, first of all, two types of argument and reasoning. Deduction versus induction. All right, so this is now the logical terminology that we really want to get clear on to be totally skilled in this topic. We're starting with the deductive kind of argument or reasoning. So a good deductive argument is what is claimed or is what is termed as a deductively valid argument. So good deductive arguments, the terminology is deductively valid. So let's go ahead and think now about that. I'm going to erase this just because that was to set the stage, and now we're going to talk about deductive validity exclusively. Okay. Okay. Okay, so deductively valid argument. Here's the meaning of this. An argument is deductively valid when, if the premises of the argument are all true, then the conclusion must also be true. Okay, so let me write that here. If the premise of the argument are all true, then in that case, the conclusion of the argument must, very important, also be true. Okay, so if the premises of the argument are all true, then the conclusion of the argument must also be true. That's what it is for an argument to be deductively valid. Okay, so when you have got premises that guarantee the conclusion to be true, if they are, then the argument's valid. In other words, with a valid argument, it is impossible for the premises to all be true and still somehow for the conclusion to be false. So therefore, deductively valid arguments are sometimes referred to as truth-preserving, because they guarantee that if the premises are assumed to be true, then the conclusion will have to also be true. So they will never take you from true premises to a false conclusion. So now let me provide some examples of deductively valid arguments so that you can kind of understand the concept itself. Okay? Am I the homie? I mean, cool. So you see this definition here. Maybe I'll put it in the notes really fast in the chat, just so that it's not lost when I erase the notes. Okay. So there you see that in the chat. Okay. Yeah, so like let's take a look at this argument. Okay. No president has walked on the moon. No president has walked on the moon, on the lunar surface. Trump is the president. Okay, so with this argument, I'm just providing the two premises. Let's see if you can deduce the conclusion. It's pretty elementary here, but like figure that out if you can. What would be the logical conclusion to deduce from these two premises? No president has been on the moon, has walked on the moon. And Trump is the president. So therefore, what's the conclusion is my question. Good note, Sebastian, we'll get to that in a minute, that Trump has never walked on the moon. Okay, good. Okay, so is this a valid argument? Yes. Why though? Because if the two premises are true, and they actually are, but just suppose they're true, that no president has walked on the moon, and second of all, that Trump is one of those people who've been president, it will follow then that Trump has not walked on the moon. If these two statements are true, this one has to be. It's not like this is optional if these two things are true. If these facts are true, then this is a logical consequence of them that just deductively follows from them, okay? And sometimes we can display the validity of a logical argument through the means of Venn diagrams. So like, for example, you can help me fill out this little diagram that I'm going to show here. So I'm going to draw one circle, and I'm going to label it with the letter P. And that circle is just going to stand for all of the United States presidents that have existed. So here is that set, P. Who's a member of this circle? Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, George Bush, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Jackson, all the different U.S. presidents, all 45 of them are somewhere in this set. It's just used for a visual demonstration. Now I'm going to draw another circle, and I'm going to label it M. And that circle is going to stand for all of the men that have walked on the moon. Like we have had some astronauts walk on the moon. I'm not familiar with all of their names, but anyways. If I want to make this second circle labeled M, where shall I draw it in relationship to P in order to show this first statement is true? If no president has ever walked on the moon, then how shall I draw the circle of M in relationship to this circle labeled P for the presidents? Just tell me. Separate. Exactly, Taya. It's like this. Why are they disjoint and not overlapping? Well, because there's not even been one case where the two sets have a joint member. No president has ever walked on the moon. No person who has walked on the moon has ever been president. And so they don't overlap. Now, with Venn diagrams, when they do overlap, that means there's a member of both sets. So if there had been like one president that had walked on the moon, if Obama or somebody had been able to get up there while they were president, or even before or after, I guess, then we would have a little intersection with the one member in it. But that's never happened. So next, Trump is the president, right? So I'm going to draw the letter T somewhere in these circles to designate that Trump is the president. So where will the letter T go in these different circles, or in relation to these circles? Since Trump is the president, I would place T exactly where on this diagram? Within the circle of P. That's right. So here you go. Why is T inside of this circle? Well, because it's one of the presidents, along with all the others. Why is there still open space outside of the T? Because he's just one member of that group, not the whole thing. So does this show that the conclusion has to be true? Yes. Because if Trump had ever walked on the moon, he would have to be in this circle. But this circle does not intersect with the circle of presidents, as we see from premise 1, since no president has walked on the moon. So that's a logically valid argument. In case the two premises are true, the conclusion just has to be as well. Okay? JFK sent people to the moon, and the last moon walk, I believe, was in the mid-70s, about like 1974 or 5. We had the means to do it. It'd be much easier, I believe, to do it with current day technology and computers, but I guess the budgetary desire to do it after we've already sent a few up there is perhaps of questionable importance to the government or whatever. But yeah, so there's one valid argument. Now let me give you some more, just to kind of make sure that this is sinking in. I want to hit you with like one more example. Okay. Okay, all dogs are mammals. Labradors are dogs. So what, therefore, would we conclude here? All dogs are mammals, Labradors are dogs. Therefore, thus, hence, so, consequently, that Labradors are mammals. Okay, good. All dogs are mammals. Labradors are dogs. Labs are mammals. All right? A valid argument once again, which I guess common sense just kind of tells you that it's valid. But so that we are perfectly clear, let's just create a quick Venn diagram so you can see this, that this is valid. Okay, all dogs are mammals. So first of all, this circle will stand for dogs. And every different dog that exists is inside of that set. Now, it says up here that all dogs are mammals. So if that's true, then I'm going to draw another circle labeled A. And where shall I put this A circle in relationship to D? Remember that drawing this secondary circle is now going to demonstrate visually that all the dogs are mammals. So the M circle, how shall this be constructed in our diagram? Tell me about M. So you good job with the conclusion. So around the circle of D, inside there is a containment relation, but it is D which is contained within A. It's not an intersection. It's this. Because if it was an intersection, like for example, what you've said here, if you were talking about, sorry, this visual, that does not say all dogs are mammals, so this is not correct. What this says is that there's some dogs that are mammals, the little overlapping section, mammal and dog, both. But over here is all the dogs that are not mammals, and over here all the mammals that are not dogs. So that won't work, because if all dogs are mammals, we shouldn't have all of this non-shaded region here. Okay, so it's not intersecting, no. It's that D is subsumed within A, because D is a full, proper subset of those things that are, sorry guys, mammals. That's what I meant to write, the letter M, not A, okay? So all dogs are mammals. Clear enough? Clear enough to you guys? Just making sure, don't want to move on too fast. Dogs, mammals. All these things are a part of this larger circle, okay? Why is there more space in the mammal circle that goes outside of the range of D? Because there's human beings, giraffes, monkeys, rhinos, a whole bunch of other things out here that are also mammals, but they're not dogs. Okay, so next statement is that Labradors are dogs, right? So I will draw a little letter L on this diagram somewhere, and what it's going to show us visually is that everything that's a Labrador is a dog. So where will L go in that case? Where shall the letter L for Labrador go here? Now hopefully we get that. Within the circle of D, yes. Why? Because Labradors are all dogs. Okay, so if Labradors are dogs and all dogs are mammals, does it follow that Labradors are mammals? Yes, of course, because they're fully contained within this set, which is itself a subset of this set. And so in that case, we see it yet again that that's a valid argument. There's no way of showing these two premises to be true, which would leave the possibility for this to be false. It's sort of like, look, right now, you guys are, well, I don't know exactly, we're all split apart. So when we had a physical classroom, this is a better example. But like, suppose that you're standing in Fullerton, the city of Fullerton. Fullerton is within California. So therefore, if you're in Fullerton, you're in California. That's just valid. Because as long as Fullerton's a part of California, and everywhere in Fullerton is something that's in California, then anywhere that you stand in Fullerton is a place that is also in California. Okay, now, the next thing I kind of want to have to show you guys is another interesting concept that has to do with deduction. What we're going to learn about now is what's called soundness. What is it for an argument to be a sound argument? Okay. So for an argument to be sound, it basically has to have two main features. First of all, it has to be deductively valid. But then the second part is that it also has to have all true premises. So sound argument is simply a deductively valid argument with all true premises. Sorry, 1 second. I need to get my cat. Eddie. He's trying to grab his rubber band and, like, you know. I see him running around with, like, that little rubber band in his mouth, sorry. And so, like, can swallow it or whatever. I gotta always keep tabs on these crazy kitties. So, yeah, back to what I had said. Soundness, sound argument. If an argument is sound, it's simply a deductively valid argument where all the premises are really true in the real world. So sound. A deductively valid argument with all true premises. So a deductively valid argument, and this is really the main key, where all the premises are true. Okay, so, oh, thanks a lot, yeah. Always got one eye on them, you know, kind of in my peripheral vision. They're just all over the place. So I'm going to write this in the chat too. Sound. Sound, the deductively valid argument with all true premises. Okay, so what you're going to learn right now is that there can be valid arguments that are sound, but there can also be valid arguments that are not sound. So like the two examples that I just had up here on the board, no president has walked on the moon. Donald Trump is president, and therefore he has not walked on the moon. That's valid. We already covered that. But it's also sound. And why is that? It's because the premises are both like really true in actual reality. As a matter of fact, no president has walked on the moon. And as a matter of fact, Donald Trump is the president. So the conclusion follows from the premises. That's why it's valid. But the premises are also really in correspondence with the reality that we are in. So it's sound. It's valid with that little extra that the premises are really true. Okay? But not every valid argument is sound. So I'm going to try and now display some further examples, some of which are valid and sound, and some of which are valid but not sound. And you will then just, you know, hopefully be able to tell me if you can identify which ones are which. Okay, so we erase this. Okay. Every president has walked on the moon. Lincoln was president. Lincoln was president, so therefore you can maybe deduce the conclusion of this argument. So every president has walked on the moon. Lincoln was president. I think you probably follow. What would be what do you deduce from those statements? What's to be concluded? That Lincoln walked on the moon. That's right. Let's see really fast if we can get through this little lesson. Tell me, this argument is this a valid argument? Valid. Is it? And that's just a straightforward question. Is this valid? Jade, you saying yes? Okay. Hamlet says no. Okay, Dana, I see yes. I'm just going to hold you in suspense for a minute. One person saying yes and no. This is not possible for any answer to be yes and no. Good, Taya. Deductively valid but not sound. Okay, good, exactly. So let me clarify and tell you exactly what's up. This argument is valid. That's a valid argument. It's valid, okay? Why is it valid? Because if, keep in mind the word if these premises are true, Forget whether they actually are or not, but if they were true, then this would be a logical consequence of them, and it would have to be true as well. So assuming that these are true, this is just a logical consequence of them. So this follows from these premises. The right answer is that though it is valid, it's not sound. But tell me now exactly why it's not sound. Since we've seen the definition of soundness, why isn't this sound? It's not sound. But there's a particular reason, there's a specific reason, specific answer to this question. What is the reason that it's not sound? The argument that you see there. Okay, Jay, good. You say it's not true, but that's sort of correct, but I want to be even more precise. Which part is not true? Well, you say the premises aren't true. One of them is true, but not all of them, okay? Not all of them are true. Which premise is not true? Exactly, the first one. The first premise says every president has walked on the moon. Not true. Not even one has done so. But on the assumption of this being true, and on the further assumption of this being true, we are led to this conclusion. So it is valid in the sense that the information of these premises logically implies the information of the conclusion. But it's not sound because one of the premises is just out of touch with reality. It's not true. Okay, so just know that an argument can be valid even if it's not sound. Having a false premise does not invalidate an argument. It simply deprives it of being sound. And the fact that this is valid, once again, we could show with a diagram if we really want to. So suppose here, these are the presidents. Let me make it a little bigger for you. So these are the presidents, these are the moonwalkers, and here's Lincoln. So if it was true that every president has walked on the moon, and that's indicated by P being subsumed within M, if it's true that every president has walked on the moon, and Lincoln's one of those presidents, then he would fall within the larger circle contained by M. So it's valid, but it's not sound due to premise one. Okay? Cool. So let's get rid of this example and try another. Okay. All right, let's see. Says there, all humans have two biological parents. Give me the name of a living, well-known human being on the planet Earth today. Somebody who I know, you know, and everybody else in this class knows. Like a real person, not just like a fictional person. LeBron James, okay, good example. All humans have two biological parents. What do you think I'm gonna write here? LeBron James what? Well, you got a lot of examples. I like all these examples. Joe Rogan, Einstein, Jared Higgins. Yeah, it's a little more obscure. Dr. Vulich, Taylor Swift. I'll go with LeBron because it's already up there. But LeBron James is a human, even though kind of like a superhuman athlete, to be honest, but whatever. He's a human being. He's a member of the Homo sapiens like you. And what would be the conclusion in that case? That LeBron James, conclusion now, so just following the logic, right? All humans have two biological parents. LeBron James is a human, and in that case, therefore, LeBron has two biological parents. Okay, now tell me the status of this argument in terms of the terminology that we're introducing here. This argument is what kind of argument overall? Very good. We get the conclusion. That's exactly right. But what would be the label for such an argument? It's known as a what type of argument? You're right. It is sound. It's valid, and this one is sound. Now, this one's sound, but the last one with the thing about every president has walked on the moon, that one was not sound. What's the difference? What is it that makes this one sound? Well, because first of all, it's valid. The conclusion logically follows the premises. It has to be true if the premises are true. And the reason that it's sound, just to make sure that you understand the reason for that answer, it's sound because both of the premises are in fact true. It's true that all humans have two biological parents. It's also true that LeBron James is a human being. And so since these two things are true, plus they imply this conclusion, it's both valid and it's also sound. The one that I gave previously, no president has walked on the moon and Trump is the president, so he has not walked on the moon. That's also valid and sound. So let me put one more up there, okay? All dogs can fly. Pit bulls are dogs. All dogs can fly. Pit bulls are dogs. Thus, hence, it follows that. What will be the conclusion in this case? Pretty easy, I think, by now. If you're following along, you should get this one pretty fast. Our logical conclusion to deduce is simply that pit bulls can fly. And maybe now you're starting to see the kind of pattern. This would be which kind of argument then? This would be one that's blank and blank. What's the answer? It's valid, correct. But there's one more thing I'm asking for. It's not sound, exactly. That's right, not sound. It's valid, but it's not sound. And the reason that it's not sound is evidently because of the false premise number one, which says something not true, that all dogs can fly. Okay, so what I'm just trying to show you is the difference between deductive validity and soundness. You can have a valid argument that's not actually sound, as long as the conclusion is a logical consequence that's implied by the premises. So when you are evaluating an argument to see whether it's valid or not, you're not actually looking at whether the truth of the premises is there. You're simply just looking at the relationship logically between the information that is here and the information that is in the conclusion. So you don't even really have to consider whether the premises are true to judge whether the argument is valid. But when you are trying to determine whether the argument is sound, that is when you would take view of whether the premises are actually really true in the actual world. Okay, so validity is not so much about truth and falsehood of the premises. It's about whether the premises imply the conclusion. It's whether if we grant or assume the truth of the premises, whether that would. Now, in the best case scenario, if you're reasoning deductively and you're using these types of arguments, you would hope for your arguments to be both valid and sound. That's the ideal. But of course, the problem with that is we're not, we're fallible human beings. Our judgment is not 100% accurate all the time. So since we're not omniscient, all-knowing gods, a lot of times we don't exactly have 100% certainty about whether our premises that we use are true. So in a lot of cases, the best that we can do is present a valid argument and leave it to our critics to determine and challenge our assumptions. Right? So that's where you hear a lot of discussion. Someone says, well, I grant that your argument is valid. It's a valid argument, but the problem is you're making some false assumptions, right? Like if somebody said to you, aliens will steal my children if I let them play at the park. Therefore, I don't let them play at the park because I don't want them to get abducted by aliens. you could say to that person, well, I mean, it's a valid argument, right? Like if I grant you that there really are aliens that will abduct your child and that you don't want the child to be abducted, I can see how you reach the conclusion, don't let them go to the park. But though it's valid, that's not a sound argument, because it's just not true that there's like a problem with the alien abduction of children or whatever, right? So sometimes a person may be reasoning in a way that shows that they're drawing the right connections, but they're still relying on false information. So, the best we can do is try our, best to get to a reasonable, valid argument. And if it's in fact unsound, then that's something that'll be pointed out by critics of the argument. And sometimes you will be the one who judges another person's argument to be valid but not sound. So yeah, until we all are, perfect and all-knowing, the best we'll be able to do in many cases is to present arguments which rely on assumptions that we take to be true, but that are subject to criticism by others. Okay. Now, let me give you another quick example here. Therefore, this argument, it says Dr. Vulich is from Los Angeles, and therefore Dr. Vulich is a professor. Is that valid or not? That's my question to you. So good. It's not valid. No, it's not valid, exactly. But are the statements both true? Yes, I am from Los Angeles, and I am a professor. So I'm trying to let you guys know something, that just being true is not enough to make the argument valid. Just having true premises and a true conclusion is not by itself enough to guarantee validity, because if the premises do not imply the conclusion, then it's still invalid, okay? So I am from Los Angeles and I am a professor, but this does not prove that I'm a professor. You see, there are so many people from Los Angeles that are not professors, and I know a lot of them, and probably you do too. So just because I'm from Los Angeles doesn't lead to the logical necessity that I'm a professor, because in fact, I could have done anything else with my life. So this doesn't guarantee the truth of the conclusion. There's a possible world, right? It's conceivable to imagine that this was true, but I did not become a professor. Okay, so when you think about validity, you have to kind of think about possible worlds a little bit. You have to imagine, is there even a possible world where all these premises are true and the conclusion is false? And of course, there's a conceivable situation, a different timeline of reality, such that I was born in LA and I don't know, I just choose to focus on music or something else or whatever in my life. Okay, so for example, Donald Trump is older than 35, therefore Donald Trump is the president. Is that a valid argument? No. Even though being 35 is a necessary requirement under the US Constitution for attaining the highest office, it's not a sufficient condition for it. Otherwise, anybody who's over 35 would have served at least one term as the US president. Okay, so just understand that validity only exists when the truth of the premises forces the conclusion to be true. But it remains invalid if there's a way for the conclusion to be even conceivably false, consistent with the truth of all the premises. Okay? All right. So next up, I told you that there's two types of logical argument and reasoning. And what we've spent some time here doing is just talking about the first type of those, which is the deductive kind of argument. But we now have to go into the discussion of the inductive style argument. All right? So there's inductive arguments too. With inductive arguments, when they're good ones, the term that's used is not deductively valid. There's a different term and a different definition. A good inductive argument using induction is what we call inductively strong. Okay, so good inductive arguments are classified as inductively strong. And here's what that means. Okay, so with an inductively strong argument, it means this, that if the premises are all true, then the conclusion is not that it must be true, but rather that it's likely to be true. So if all the premises are true, then the conclusion is highly likely to be true as well. Probable, but not totally necessarily certain. Okay, so if all the premises are true, so if all the premises are true, then in that case, the conclusion is highly likely to be true as well. And I'll put that over here in our chat real fast. So, so you see there, I put in the chat the typed note. If all the premises are true, then the conclusion is highly likely to be true. So the real difference between an inductive argument, that is an inductively strong argument, versus deductively valid argument, is that with the deductive stuff, if it's valid, the premises lead you to a conclusion that must be true if those premises are. With induction, though, if the premises are true, you're led to a conclusion that is most likely going to be true, but it's not absolutely ironclad certain. So like, if I have, take this argument, I have 2 apples in my lunch bag. Second premise, I have 2 oranges in my lunch bag. Therefore, conclusion, I have at least 4 fruits in this bag. That would be deductively valid, because if it is a given that there's 2 oranges and 2 apples, then that's not possible for there to be some number less than 4 fruits, because we've enumerated that there's 2 each of those other 2 kinds of fruits. So with deductive validity, the conclusion isn't just, oh yeah, probably. It's something like math, like it has to be that way if the premises are assumed true. With induction, though, it's different. So let me give you some examples now of inductive arguments. We've seen the definition of the concept, and now we're going to fill it in by examples. Okay, so actually here, I'll just make this one a little more simplified and just one premise by itself. So the premise says this, the sun. The sun has been, well, let me say, I don't need to say been. Sorry to correct. Has come up every morning for a very long time. We're talking about pretty much billions of years here. Okay, so the sun has come up every morning for literally billions of years. Okay, the sun has come up every morning for billions of years. Now tell me what might be a reasonable conclusion to draw from that information. The sun has come up every morning for billions of years. Therefore, what might you infer from that? What could be something that a person might conclude based on that information? That the sun will come up tomorrow morning. Exactly, good, Jasmine. So therefore, the sun will come up tomorrow. Okay, so looking at this argument, well, what do you say would be the status of this argument? As we're learning our new terminology, probably it'll come clear to you. This argument is one of the what type of arguments? It's a fill-in-the-blank type of argument. Which kind? You're looking at an what? An inductively strong argument. Exactly, Kyle. Let's examine the argument and find out exactly why. The conclusion of the argument is that the sun will come up tomorrow. And what is the evidence that's given in support of that? The track record going back in time. And it's a very long, extensive track record with no counterexamples. Every single morning the sun's rising in the east, and it's been doing that for as long as the planet has been in a planetary orbit around the sun in the solar system, and that goes back billions of years since we know the age of certain objects on the Earth that we can carbon date. So if it's been going on for billions of years, that's a really long pattern to rely on. So the assumption that it will continue into the next case is a pretty reliable assumption. So with a high degree of probability and confidence, you can say that this is likely to be true based on the premise. But it's not 100% certain, and that's why it's induction. Because after all, the sun being what it is just a star, so at some point in time, it will exhaust its fuel, explode, and then the supernova of the sun would just no longer, we wouldn't be orbiting any object that still exists at that point. There wouldn't be any sun to rise. So that's hopefully very, very far in the future. I think it's billions of years out according to some of the science that I've read about. But at any rate, it's not 100% certain. Maybe a giant asteroid or something could come crashing through our local cosmos and take out the sun and scramble the planetary orbits completely. So we hope that doesn't happen. It's probably not going to happen. With such a long pattern that is held, we have good reason to assume that it's going to continue in the same way, at least for another day. But we can't guarantee that conclusion absolutely, so that's why it's inductively strong. The conclusion is very well based on the evidence, and it's highly likely to be true. But it's not the same thing as saying, here's 2 apples and 2 oranges, therefore I've got 4 fruits, because that is just sort of like a deductively reasoned conclusion. Okay, so there's many other examples. Let me think of another. In my entire life, over 30 years of living, I've never been shot. So I've never taken a bullet wound. I've never, ever been shot in my life. And, I've been alive for a while now. So based on that, I might think, what? Therefore, in over 30 years, I've never once been shot by a gun. And so therefore, I infer that what? I'm sorry for the morbid example, but I'm just trying to, change it up a little bit. That I won't be shot today or tomorrow, right? Never get shot, Jade, is a little bit kind of more extensive into the future. I would probably hesitate to make such a long-ranging prediction based on that, but at the least, probably I would say I won't be shot today or tomorrow. If it's something that hasn't happened in this much time, then you assume it's something that doesn't happen very often, and it's very low likelihood. But I can't guarantee, the world being what it is, I can't guarantee with 100% absolute certainty that it wouldn't happen, because weird things can happen, unlikely things can happen. But it's a safe bet, and it's probably not going to happen, okay? When you get in your car, if you drive, and you turn the key, what do you think is going to happen when you turn the key on your car in the ignition? Or if you have a really nice car, when you push the button, what do you think would happen at that point in time? I don't know. That it will turn on, yeah? Why though? Why do you think it's going to turn on? Like what reason do you have to believe in that? Well, it's induction again. It's induction because the thought process is, I don't know exactly what kind of car you drive, but let's assume the thought process goes like this. I've had my car for 4 or 5 years. It's never once failed to start. So every time in the past 4 years I put the key in, it starts. Therefore, when I put it in today, it'll start. And probably it will. The track record going back seems to indicate that that's probable. But as with the other examples, you can't say that it's 100% absolutely guaranteed. Mechanical problems or just random, malfunctioning of the system could occur, in which case it wouldn't start the same way that you had been expecting. Okay, so now with induction, we rely on it all the time. We reason inductively even when we're not thinking consciously about doing it. Like when you get up and you are about to drive out somewhere, if you're leaving at a certain time, you might say, oh, I'm going to hit traffic. because I know that in my neighborhood, every time I go out at like the freeway at 9 a.m., I'm hitting rush hour. So I'm about to leave at 9 a.m. and it's going to be rush hour. You rely on that inductive reasoning because we have to make assumptions about what's likely to occur in the future based on our experience and observation of the past. But with induction, it's never an absolute guarantee. Nonetheless, it's definitely reasonable to rely on it, and we have to. Scientific reasoning relies a lot on induction because science relies on the observation of regularities and patterns in nature that we assume will persist into the future. But just because the pattern has always held in the past doesn't mean it's not possible for it to be broken. So you rely on induction because it's the safer, more probable odds. But we can never, absolutely place total confidence in the inductive conclusion. Like say, for example, let me give you two examples. So every United States president in over 200 years has been a man, right? That's true. We all know that. So every president's been a man. And then one might conclude based on that in the next election, the president that will be the winner will be a male, another man, right? The pattern having never been broken will just continue. But of course, it's not impossible or inconceivable that a viable female candidate could win the presidency. Hillary Clinton was very close, and there are other strong female candidates that ran on the Democratic side. Some people say Nikki Haley or somebody could run on the Republican side, or even Ivanka Trump someday in the future. So anyways, it's possible for that pattern to break. Before Obama was elected, you could have said every single U.S. president in the history of the U.S. has been a white male, and that was true. So a person might have reasoned then inductively, so John McCain will win this election also because he's white and Obama's black. But Obama, of course, broke the pattern, longstanding in U.S. history. So once again, with induction, it's something that's usually reliable, but it's not the same as deduction, which leads us to a conclusion that can't be false if the premises are actually true. We keep using induction examples having to do with elections and stuff. I don't know. In every 4-year cycle since the founding of the United States, there's been a presidential election. And it's 2020, and this is the year that we're up for another cycle. So you would assume we'll have another Democratic election this year, because in over 230 years of US history, we've always had one every 4 years. I think that's probably a reasonable assumption, because why should the pattern be interrupted now after such a long and rich tradition and history? Some people do say that it's possible that we'll have disruption to our democratic processes or something. So suppose there was a military coup or some other type of very disruptive outcome having to do with the election that invalidates the results or something. God forbid. I hope that would never happen. But at any rate, we hope that the inductive assumptions bear out the same way, at least in that one case. Yeah, so in the end, we are looking at an inductively strong argument here. Now, there can be inductively weak arguments, and that would be the case of an argument where the premises don't even lead to the probability of the conclusion. Like random things that happen by chance or luck would be inductively weak. On my run around my neighborhood. So I then say, if I go out next Monday on a run through my neighborhood, I'll find $5 again. That would be an inductively weak argument because based on just one occurrence of something that is unlikely to repeat, I don't have very strong evidence for the predicted conclusion. So you have to judge inductive arguments based on how much evidence the premises establish towards the conclusion. If I said I wore red socks on Thursday last week and one of my professors canceled his class, so if I wear red socks next Thursday, the class will be canceled again. That's associating two things that are not even causally related or connected. And so when there's no law-like connection between the one event and the other, there's no particular strong evidence for the conclusion that's been given there. So both kinds of arguments are used in logical reasoning, deduction and induction. When you reason towards a conclusion that's probable based on the evidence, that's inductively strong. When you reason towards a conclusion that's necessary if the premises are assumed to be true, then that's a deductive argument. So there's a little more I kind of wanted to say to you guys also about different types of sentences. I don't think I got to cover that, right? Nobody, just remind me, but I don't think I talked to you all about what are interrogatives, imperatives, and assertoric sentences. Is that true? That is not something covered, right? So my plan is to just do that at the top of the next meeting since we're running low on time for today. But let me just kind of give you a little note about where we're at. I'm going to provide for you the instructions for the first homework assignment on Thursday, so not to worry. I've not given you the directions for it yet, but you'll have 12 days to do it because it will be due Tuesday of week 4. And this is Tuesday of week 2, so you're getting the instructions sent to you this Thursday. And I'll talk to you in the lecture about it as well. It's simply a workbook exercise that has to do with identifying different types of deductively valid arguments. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about deductive validity on Thursday. I'm going to tell you what are these different types of sentences. And then we'll just continue going through chapter 8 in the book. So with Thursday's meeting, you'll see in the syllabus that there's some pages listed from the book for that lecture. So try to read them. There's just a few of them there. And then that'll help you to get more out of our Thursday meeting next time. So I don't know. I guess that's about all that I have right now. Any questions? If you have them, I'll be happy to take them. If not, then I guess we'll be good to go for today's lecture and just continue on Thursday. So let me know what's up. Does it sound good? You guys good to go? If so, let me know in the chat. And if there's any questions, put that in the chat and I'll see it. So I don't want to close before everyone's on the same page. So does inductively strong arguments not need 2 premises? Okay, good question, Eduardo. In fact, no argument needs 2 premises. It can have 1, 2, 3, or any number. It just cannot have 0. So it's okay for there to be 1. In this case, I tried to make it simple by just providing 1, but I could have enumerated it out as more than 1. I could have said, on this date, the sun came up. On this date, the sun came up. And I could have just kept listing dates, but I just wanted to sort of summarize with that longer premise there. But yeah, it's fine for an argument to have at minimum 1 premise, but a lot of what they're called deductive syllogisms, a lot of those involve 2. So though 2 is the typical case with some deductively valid arguments, it's not limited to that. There could be more or less than 2 as long as it's not 0. Like for example, if I could give an argument with 3 premises. I'm taller than John. John is taller than Sally. Sally is taller than Mitchell. So therefore, I'm taller than Mitchell, because that's just the transitivity of the taller than relation. With an inductive argument, I could also have more than 2 premises if needed. I could say, I received a Christmas gift 2 years ago or 3 years ago from my parents. I received one 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and I could enumerate all the different years and make each one a different premise. And then I could say, therefore, I will get a Christmas gift this coming year as well. So yeah, that's no problem at being 1, 2, or 3. It just depends on the example. All right, let's see. Amount of detail. Thanks a lot, Taya. I'm trying my best. Without the in-person interaction, I really just try to focus on being clear if I can be. Well, perfect then. I really appreciate you guys. That's awesome. So thanks again, and I will definitely see you guys back on Thursday. All right. Have a great one, and see you then. Thanks.